Josh Jacobs is the best running back in football. The Raiders get a W, and there's a big AFC West challenge coming up next week. Let's talk about it. Welcome to What Happens in Vegas. I'm your host, Neil Maligno. I appreciate you guys for joining me as always. Raider Nation, what up? Let's talk about this. We got a lot happening. Josh Jacobs became the best running back in football. Well, at least the league leader in football. He's the best running back in football to me. Of course, I'm biased. We're Raider fans. It is the way it is, right? But at the end of the day, the Raiders, they get a W. Josh Jacobs goes from, I don't know if he's going to play, to absolutely insane numbers, absolutely insane impact, crushing it for the Raiders. There's so much here to talk about. It's mostly Josh Jacobs. It's mostly the Raiders W. And then we got the Chargers coming up this week in week 13. Let's get into it. Let me go ahead and bring up some information here so we can chop it up together. All right. Raiders, they won 40-34 against the Seahawks. This was a crazy game. It was back and forth, which is, I know the Raiders gave up 34 points, but it was at least good that the Raiders offense could keep up with the Seahawks. They scored 40 points. And I don't know. And listen, I talked about it last week. If you're a Josh McDaniels hater, if you're a Derek Carr hater, this hurts your soul. I get it. It kills your content. It kills the negative feed that you're spewing out there to get Raider fans hyped up, to get you your clicks. I'm sorry, man. We got another W in the books. You had to just say some positive shit for the week. It is what it is. You just have to be positive. It's the way it happens. So the Raiders win 40-34. Things weren't perfect. Clearly, by giving up 34 points, things weren't always perfect. But let's start with Derek Carr. 295 yards, 3 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. Those sucked. Literally the first play of the game, Derek Carr threw an interception. Like it was about to get ugly quick. I was feeling really down. I was like, oh, here we go. This is not what I tuned in for. But at the end of the day, he still threw 2 interceptions, which always sucks. You guys know I like to highlight Derek Carr when he doesn't throw interceptions. This week he did, but he threw 3 touchdowns. So he kind of balanced it out a little bit, just a little bit short of 300 yards. Overall, good game, solid. Derek Carr did his thing to lead this team. Most importantly, didn't falter, didn't give up, didn't become the weak spot for the team. So Derek Carr overall handled things pretty well. At the running game, this is the highlight of this entire game for us, right? Josh Jacobs had 229 rushing yards, almost a 7-yard average on 33 carries, 2 touchdowns, absolutely crushed it. The only thing Raider fans are thinking right now is, how did you not pick up this guy's option? How did you let that 5th-year option go? The Raiders are going to have to, the Raiders going into the offseason will have quite the, I don't want to say problem, but quite the situation on their hands in terms of what do we do? I, of course, am all for re-signing Josh Jacobs. You're in this situation, though, where you just re-signed Derek Carr, you just re-signed Darren Waller, you just traded for Davante Adams and gave him a fat contract. So are you going to throw that much more money into the running back, Josh Jacobs? Or do you say, hey, we can do this without Josh Jacobs? This is a system thing. We got Zamir White here. We think he's pretty good. Other guys are making sense. We can plug and play. That's going to be a big question mark for the Raiders going into the season because they didn't pick up this 5th-year option. They really put themselves in a bad spot for doing that. I hated it when they did it, just because we've seen Josh Jacobs really be a focal point of this offense and a huge player on this team for the entire time he's been here. But they didn't believe in it. Maybe they wanted to motivate him. That's what I'm hoping. I'm hoping that they can re-sign him, that he likes being here and really wants to get things right. And sometimes when players are in those positions, they will take a little bit less money than they could get somewhere else. He's still not old. He's going to be able to get a fat contract. So if the Raiders can do it, we'll see. I don't really want to harp on it too much right now just because there's no point in it. But Zamir White had a decent game for the 2 carries that he did. At least they weren't negative yards. Amir Abdullah made some plays. So overall, this was a good game from the running backs. Well, amazing situation, obviously, with Josh Jacobs, the heart and soul of this team. I don't care what you think. Receiving game, Davante Adams, no touchdown, 7 receptions, 74 yards. Josh Jacobs, really the highlight here, 6 catches, 74 yards. Mac Hollins had 63 yards and a touchdown. Amir Abdullah, like I just mentioned, had a pretty good game, 39 yards and a touchdown. Foster Moreau scored a touchdown for 33 yards that he had all game, 3 catches, 33 yards. Keelan Cole got in on the action, and Jakob Johnson did nothing. I don't know why he's here. He might have caught the ball. I forget. No, he didn't. It doesn't say reception, so I'm not sure why he's here on the list. But overall, decent game from the pass catchers. Again, this is an offense that's missing Darren Waller. This is an offense that's missing Hunter Renfrow. It'd be nice to see what this offense can do with all those guys back healthy and playing. I mean, can you imagine what Derek Carr may be able to do with when they infuse Darren Waller and Hunter Renfrow into the offense? It could be exciting. We'll see. It's what we've been kind of planning for this whole year. So I don't want to get too excited on it because we haven't seen it. We kind of got super hyped going into the year, and then it has never played out that way yet. So as of right now, we don't know what that's going to be like. We would like to believe it's going to play out really well. But again, this is a situation where we're talking about Josh Jacobs' contract is, do you trade Darren Waller after this year? Do you keep him? Again, this front office is going to be busy in the offseason. There's no question about it. On defense, Denzel Perryman got an interception. That was exciting. Maxx Crosby was an absolute animal, sack and a half. Andrew Billings got in there and got a sack. Bilal Nichols got half of a sack in there with Maxx Crosby. Overall, some pretty good pressure. Some pretty good pressure from everybody. Sam Webb did all right, kind of redeemed himself from last week. But overall, this again is a one guy wrecking crew in Maxx Crosby. The stats don't do it justice. I know it says a sack and a half. It doesn't do it justice. Nothing does it justice. There's no stat that you can give for Maxx Crosby that says, oh, I get it. He's amazing. You just have to watch the game. The guy is relentless. So this game overall has some really big bright spots. Maxx Crosby, Josh Jacobs, other guys that got involved a little bit. Denzel Perryman finally, getting an interception, looking good out there. Just some real bright spots. But Maxx Crosby and Josh Jacobs are definitely the talk of the game. No question about it. Now, after this win, this is how the AFC West is playing out. Chiefs just dominating at 9-2. Chargers in second place at 6-5. Raiders at 4-7, and the Broncos last at 3-8. The Broncos are kind of self-imploding at this point. The Raiders we're on that path to self-imploding. It seems like with a 2-game win streak right now that things are hopefully turning a little bit. This is what the team, the coaches, Derek Carr, all these guys felt like was coming up in the near future. And so it's happening now. We'll see if it continues. We'll see if it's something they continue to build off of, or if it's just this temporary window of success that we're having. And again, the games all year have been close. Now these last two, the Raiders edged out. So this is why when you looked at the stats from last year and you go, well, the Raiders won a bunch of 7-point games, or where they were losing by 7 or less, or they won by 1 touchdown, whatever the case was, it's hard to use that as an example going into the next season, because again, if you get put in those same situations, you don't always know that you're going to come out on top. That's a really thin line, like a really hard one to balance. You would prefer more dominant wins, not these overtime wins or games where you win by 3 points or 7 points. Although it's the NFL, so it's going to happen. So these things are easy, to swing both ways. So you could easily be 7-4 right now, or in this case, you're 4-7. I don't think the Raiders aren't going to make the playoffs. So if you're thinking about that, I can't talk about it. I just don't see it happening. But it would be nice to take second place in the division, right? That'd be cool. We play the Chargers this week, so we'll look at that. Here are some tweets that I wanted to share. This is Harry Ruiz saying that this is a quote from Josh Jacobs. It all started before the game. This fan, when we came out of the tunnel, held up a sign, 3-7, not bad for a team with no talent. He was screaming at us all this bad stuff. I just looked at him and I said, thank you for that. I needed that today. You turned me up. So this is Josh Jacobs talking about part of the motivation for why he had such a great game. Again, stats don't do it justice. Well, in his case, they kind of might. But if you watch the game, Josh Jacobs went crazy, and he's crediting fans like this guy who did this as part of the inspiration. And again, this is a guy who coming into the game, we did not know if he was going to play. Josh Jacobs, this is from the Las Vegas Raiders Twitter account, the only player since at least 1950 with 225 plus rushing yards and 70 plus receiving yards in a single game. The only player since at least 1950 with those stats. Come on, man. And you didn't pick up his 5th-year option. You're going to pay for that. You're going to pay for not picking up that 5th-year option. Josh DeBow, most yards rushing in a game in Raiders history. Josh Jacobs, 229 today versus Seattle. Napoleon Kaufman, 227 versus Denver in 1997. And Bo Jackson, 221 versus the Seahawks in 1987. Josh Jacobs put himself at the top of the ranks here. Most rushing yards in a game in Raider history. No matter how this plays out, you cannot discredit this man. And when you look at those numbers and you see the stuff he's doing in the games, helping this team win, you're really going to hurt, I feel like, the structure of this team, the confidence in this team, the faith in this team, the players in that locker room if you don't re-sign this guy. You see Devontae Adams out here all over the place, caping for him, showing pitch, like, showing him support him. The team loves him. Derek Carr always talks him up. Josh McDaniels is talking him up. But none of that matters if you don't re-sign him. End of the day, period. Brian Baldinger here about Maxx Crosby. He's the best defensive player in the NFL and proves it every week. Once again, he played every single snap, no plays off. This vulture enjoys his QB meet, the condor, keeping the Raider Nation alive with hope. Brian knows what's up. He knows what's up. He's the best player in the NFL on defense, period. Maxx Crosby didn't take a play off. And we ain't talking about when he does play that he's like kind of lazy on some snaps, or he's kind of, just out there just messing around, not really going full speed, full throttle. Nah, Maxx Crosby, every play is full throttle. He's all in every single play. So this is the kind of stuff you love to see. This is the kind of player your defense requires. Now you need to build around this guy. You need to get him support. You need Nate Haas back from injury. You need more better players in the secondary. You need linebackers who can support him. You need a D-line who can help. It can't just always be Maxx Crosby. That if it's just Maxx Crosby, that's why you give up 34 points. That's why it's hard for you to compete in games. That's why you have to fire back and forth trying to keep up with teams, because if you don't get Maxx Crosby help, the defense is just going to give up points. It just is what it is. He is a one-man wrecking crew, but that one-man wrecking crew does need a team. That's all there is to it. All right. That recaps this game against Seattle. The important thing is Josh Jacobs. That's the biggest takeaway from this whole thing. Josh Jacobs going crazy. Josh McDaniels still holding on to this locker room, still keeping this team believing, still keeping the faith. You can't deny that, because if it wasn't true, this team would not be winning games. They would not be winning these close games. They wouldn't be winning in overtime. They wouldn't be pulling it out. They weren't doing that earlier in the year. They were still trying to figure this thing out. They were still trying to figure out, were they bought into this? Is this right? This is a total change of pace from what we're used to. And it seems like guys are buying in now. So it seems like things are going in a more positive direction. It feels like the team is believing in themselves. They're having fun. They haven't given up. That's important when it comes to this team and its future. And it's why Josh McDaniels, can save his job. Not that he's going to be fired, because again, I don't believe he'll be fired this year, but this is the payoff, the support Mark Davis is putting in him. This is the reward. Like, hey, I believe in this guy. I believe in this coach. And if I stick with it and we believe in the plan we put in place, this will work itself out. And that's how it looks right now, that things have kind of turned and things are in a more positive direction. We're not going to talk playoffs. We're not going to get crazy. We're not talking championships this year, but we are talking about a team who was starting to figure it out potentially. And that's important. That's critical on whether this team, continues in the future with Josh McDaniels, with Derek Carr, with Josh Jacobs, with Devontae Adams. If you're not going to be good and you're not going to turn the new leaf and you're not going to start winning a whole lot more games to wrap this season up, then maybe some of those veterans are hard for you to continue to pay for and continue to try to build off of. It may make you bail quicker on a Darren Waller and his contract. These are the kind of things they're going to have to play into. And it's hard to talk about the offseason now, just because it's kind of critical and dependent on how this Raiders team finishes this season. Speaking of finishing this season, next game up, the Chargers, December 4th at 4:25 p.m. That's Eastern time. This is a big game. This is a huge game. Yes, the Chargers are in second place in the AFC West. They have a winning record. This is just a huge game. These division games are always huge games for the Raiders. The games are typically close, like all Raider games. They're not typically blowouts. It's typically a really hard fought fight. In this case, I'm going with the Raiders. I always do. I'm never going to pick the other team over the Raiders. That's just my bias. It's just what I do. It's the way I live. At the end of the day, if the Raiders win here, you still don't have a winning record. You're still not any more, better odds of going to the playoffs. It's still ugly, but it continues the streak. It continues the winning streak. It continues the positive vibes. It continues what you're building towards. And it kind of gives you a picture of the future of this team and what we expect from them and what we can expect and how we can expect to move forward. It really sucks that this is a wasted year. There's no positive way to spin it in terms of, going to the playoffs last year and then this year it not happening. There's no positive way to spin that. the best thing you could do is just see that by the end of the season, we know what this team is going forward. We know what they need to fix. We know that what we have is the right, foundation. Those are the kind of things you want to come away at this point, because playoffs is a hard thing to reach for. It's a hard thing to imagine at this point. And so it's hard to talk about the offseason until we see how this team finishes it up. And it starts here against the Chargers on December 4th. I look forward to catching up with you guys about that after the fact. I may have another episode out later this week about Josh Jacobs and what he's doing, because I just feel like he deserves more attention. Other than that, guys, I appreciate you for joining me as always. This is What Happens in Vegas, and what happens in Vegas is Raiders football.